My family, of which I am the last remaining thread, has been one of heroism and adventure, a family of brilliant bandits, a family of handsome seed, a family renowned for its bastards. The most heroic and the most bastardly people you will ever find. Hello everyone, welcome to Harry's Book Cafe. Today let's talk about Mo Yan's Red Shogun. The paragraph that I just read to you can be used as a thesis for this novel, but that's a little bit for later. First, who is Mo Yan? Mo Yan is a name that's quite unfamiliar here in the West. However, he is a widely celebrated author in China. He is one of only two Nobel Literary Prize winner, literary laureate. Back in 2012, the prize was awarded to him for the entirety of his novels, not just any single one. A couple of years ago, he was invited by Oxford University to give a lecture and an interview. Now, for those of you who watch my other channel will know I am a professional photographer, so I was honored enough to be invited to document this lecture and interview. So technically, you can say I was in the same room. I met the guy, I was in the same room as he was. Now, going back to this particular book, it was published back in 1987 when I was a young child. And I think immediately was made into a movie, which I have watched several times. It was phenomenal. But the book itself has more depth. Now, before I go in to tell you what the plot is all about, here are just some quick trigger warnings. Now, the book deals with quite a lot of violence. Extreme violence. In fact, there are bodily horror where body parts will be cut off, the skin will be peeled away. There's also trigger warnings for rape and gun rape as well. As to why those things exist in such a novel, we'll dive into the plot and we'll know why that is. So the story sets in a northern province, Shandong province in China. It's a fertile land with black earth, and the main crops in that region is sorghum. Now, so for those of you again, just like the name of the author, sorghum is perhaps quite unfamiliar. It's a edible plant, a little bit like rice, but much, much larger. When I was young, we used to drink this sorghum porridge occasionally, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big fan. It's very tough. But it does contain a lot of fiber, but it's a little bit tasteless, but very, very tough. So the story is set in that sort of desolate landscape. And the time of the story is 1930s when the Japanese invaded China. So the main protagonists is Commander Yu and his wife. So the story started with this bride being carried away to be married to a husband, the son of a village landlord who is notoriously for being wealthy. The woman whose bride-to-be were at the time happy to marry to such a wealthy family, but also very anxious because she had heard rumors that the son suffered from severe leprosy. As she enters the room, she realized that the rumors were true. She was devastated. One of the bearers who carried the bride to the destination was our main protagonist, Commander Yu. At the time, he was just a bearer. Now, through violence and machination, he managed to get her to himself, and therefore started a epic forbidden love story with lots of violence. But that's the genesis of the story. It sets up the foundation of the story. The main part of the story, however, focuses on the Japanese invasion and how those Chinese people, survived and resisted this invasion. This is a large book, and when I close the last page, my overwhelming feeling is this is a plot-driven action novel. And yet, that's just on the surface. There are much deeper meanings underneath the seemingly innocent, simplistic, action-based novel. It is like describing Moby Dick as a book for fishing. And therefore, we can't really describe this book as an action book. What it really signifies, however, beneath this surface is three things. The first is the writer's needs, the writer's desire to peel away the so-called blemished perfect heroes like those you encounter in fantasies, right? Prince Charmings and stuff like that. This book depicts that real heroes are multifaceted. They're not blameless. In fact, they are quite the opposite. The main protagonist, Commander Yu, he is a rapist, a murderer, a violent man who, if fist can be used, will not use his mouth. He's a loving husband, a violent husband. He is a lovely dad, but also a violent dad. He is a hero, a patriot. He's all of the above. He's not some Prince Charming in shiny armor who is completely blameless, who is perfectly clean and perfect. That's the first thesis of this novel. It peels away the tinted lens with which we view our heroes, yours and mine, right? Our different national heroes. To understand the second thesis of the book, we must first understand how the story was told. Now, the narrator of this novel is the grandson of the main protagonist. He himself, the grandson, has never experienced the traumatic and tumultuous time his granddad experienced during 1930. All his information comes from the grandfather and his father, told through the media of word of mouth, and also from newspapers and from historical novels, historical nonfiction. So his experience of the past was entirely secondhand. And yet, he laments that the authentic China, i.e. the China in the past, is no longer in existence. He sings elegies for that past he has never experienced. And that is the second thesis. In fact, there is a paragraph in the book that really states this perfectly. I sometimes think that there is a link between the decline in humanity and the increase in prosperity and comfort. Prosperity and comfort are what people seek, but the cost to the characters are often terrifying. Personally, I completely disagree with this statement, but you mileage my very well different. And the third thesis, or third theme, should I say, is presence of the crops of Red Shogun. Now, Red Shogun is in this book is not merely a setting inactive. It is, in fact, an active participant of this novel. Red Shogun is a physical space where the bandits can lay ambush to the Japanese soldiers. It also is a metaphor. This one is not really a metaphor, it's a representation of substance, i.e. it provides food, and also Red Shogun can be made into wine, i.e. again, substance. Metaphorically, however, it is represented as blood of the Chinese people whose life has been given away to defend the country. The blood has soaked the Shogun field, so that the Red Shogun literally takes the blood of those people and make himself grow. And Red Shogun, as the name suggests, is red. It metaphorically represents the blood of the people. It is a beautifully written novel, at times incredibly comical, and yet when you turn the page, it becomes incredibly sad and melancholy. And throughout the story, there are violence, unbelievable level of violence, and sometimes you shiver when you read those, especially those are based on actual historical incidents. And you can't help but to think, how can a human do something to another human being with that level of hatred and greed and violence? It really is a book that makes you think. Having doubt all this deeper meaning of the book, it makes me think what Stephen King had said once many years ago during an interview. And what he said was, maybe a story is just a story, meaning that there might not be a metaphorical, might not be a philosophical, deeper meaning behind the story. This book might in fact just be a action-packed, plot-driven, violent, enjoyable book without the deeper meanings that I have just articulated to you. That could very well be the case, but that's not enough. The biggest weakness I can think of is the story is told non-chronologically, and therefore sometimes you tend to scratch your head and thinking what is going on, which part of the history we're dealing with. This has happened to me many a time in the duration of reading this book. Sometimes I have to read a few paragraphs in the new chapter to realize, okay, so you are talking about this part of history now. It really jumps a lot, and without dates, a year on top of the chapter, it makes the reading experience challenging. But other than that, it's absolutely well written, beautifully written. I mean, I would highly recommend anyone who is interested in Chinese literatures to definitely give this a try. This is much more accessible, I think, than some of the classical Chinese ones. Before I finish this video, I just want to have a quick FYI on the translation itself. Now, overall, the translation is phenomenal. The problem that I had is some of the old Chinese sayings, some of the old Chinese curse words are translated pretty rigidly into English. I'll give you a couple of examples of when we want to curse someone, we turn to curse him as a turtle egg. All right, which does not make sense whatsoever in English language. You turtle egg. Does not make any sense. And yet in northern China, this is what we use on a daily basis if you want to curse. The translator rigidly translate that literally into you turtle eggs. Now, I think for many Western readers, when reading this part, he or she might find it a little puzzling. If I were the translator, I would simply delete that, replace that with your bastard. That will make most sense, and the sentimentality is exactly the same. The other very similar example is that the main protagonist was describing his wife. She is also a lamp that is not very economical, or she's not an economical lamp. Again, if you're a Western reader, you're scratching your head and say, what the hell does that mean, right? You can sort of suss it out a little bit, but again, the translator literally translates the Chinese thing into English. If I were the translator, again, I would just say, she is no saint either. That to the Western ears will make much more better sense, but I can completely understand the logic behind translating those culturally different things rigidly. It's purely a matter of taste. Anyway, guys, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoy this video. I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.